Hey YouTube, it's Yonkers Jiu-Jitsu here with the 5 tips to be a dominant white belt. So at a white belt, everyone starts at a clean slate of no knowledge. A few people have wrestling skills, some other stuff, but as far as Jiu-Jitsu knowledge, everyone starts fresh. Everyone has a first day. So what that allows you to do is if you train efficiently and smart enough, you can create a skill gap between yourself and those that start training at around the same time as yourself. Tip number 1 is to choose 1 to 2 techniques from every position to work on. So that way, whenever you're rolling, you're not just saying, all right, today I'm gonna work on, an arm bar from guard. But if you're rolling, say you never get into guard and you can't work that arm bar from guard, you didn't really get a whole lot accomplished that day. So if you make a list and on that list you have, 1 to 2 things, I would say 2 things is better. Because then if you only have one thing you're working on at a time, you get to that position, you're like, all right, then you're just spamming one move over and over, and sometimes that can be easier to shut down. But 2 things does require you to memorize a little more. So what I did was I made a list, 1 to 2 things from every position, top and bottom, side control, mount, back, playing guard, passing the guard, turtle, everything that I knew I was probably going to end up in at some point during rolls. And I made a list, and then I memorized that list. So anytime I got in whatever position I was in, saying, all right, I'm in side control. What am I working on now? And so I'd work those things. And I think it helped a lot because you're working a lot of stuff at a time. You're always working something. You're always improving something, as opposed to the example where you're only in one position working stuff. So passing the guard, for example. All right, you pass the guard. Now, you're not going to work that again until someone reguards or you let them regard. That's a case where it actually kind of is easier to start working that because you can just let someone regard. But something like side control or mount that you have to get to, that can be harder to work what you're trying to work if that's the only position you're trying to work. Tip number 2 is to work on areas that you're not good at, as opposed to working on what might already be working for you and trying to strengthen that. I believe early on it's important to close all your gaps and bring them all up to a certain level before you start strengthening your top moves or top positions. Early on it can feel like you're not getting any better or you're even getting worse when you start playing with things that you're not good at. But you keep doing those things, and eventually, after a month or however long it takes you of working on that thing, you'll start to be hitting it, and that'll actually become a strength that was once a weakness. For example, my butterfly guard. Towards the tail end of white belt, I started working on butterfly guard. Prior to that, I hadn't done any butterfly guard work, so you start working it, you get your guard pass all the time. Can't hit very many offensive moves, you don't know a whole lot from there. But you just start learning more things from there. You start working on that rolling, and then eventually, it becomes a strength. Now, butterfly guard, all I play, gi, no gi, pretty much exclusive guard. But you got to start somewhere. You got to start with every technique. You're gonna start from 0, and it's your job to build it up into a strength. And that segues directly into tip number 3. Work your guard. A lot of white belts, they're focused on top position. They don't feel comfortable off their back because it's not normal. When you're fighting, you don't generally, before you start training jiu-jitsu, no one really thinks of the opportunities there from your back, but it's huge. First of all, because in jiu-jitsu, most people start out working a lot of guard passing and not as much really in-depth guard. So also, by the time you're blue belt, if you've been working your guard for 6 months to a year already, you're going to have an advantage of those people that maybe start working, really diving deep into different guards later. You might lose, you might get your guard passed a lot, you probably will, but just force yourself to work on those sweeps, those submissions. If you want top position, starting guard, make yourself sweep and earn it. It's very helpful, especially later on. You're not always going to be able to get to top directly from standing. So if you have a good guard and you can sweep anybody, you're set. Tip number 4 is get as much mat time as possible. After class, stay and roll for 30 minutes to an hour, or or however long you can, however long, at least get a few rolls in. It really gives you the opportunity to try out what you've been drilling, to really test it out and make adjustments if need be. If you never roll, you'll never know what's working live and what's not. Transitions, because a lot of times in class, even if you do roll, sometimes you'll do a lot of positional sparring only. So you'll get a lot of work from each position, but what about transitioning between positions, which is super important, a big part of the game. I know a lot of people have obligations they have to do, family obligations, just things they need to do after class and don't have a lot of time to stay and roll. But the truth is that those who roll, those who train after, it's just more mat time, and it's a whole another part of the game. And those who roll will get better faster than those who do not. Tip number 5 is be conscious of your physical exertion. Whether you're big or small, early on, it's very tempting. You will use your strength a lot from mount, bottom. Say you might bench press a lot. That's one of the more obvious things, that you're told early on to stop doing, because you'll get countered doing that a lot. But other things aren't as obvious. So whether you're playing a guard or passing or doing something, and you notice yourself using a lot of exertion, a lot of strength, and something seems like you're trying to muscle it a lot, most likely there's a better technique from that position, or there are details to the technique you're attempting that make it work better and more efficiently without having to muscle it. So if you find yourself using a lot of strength doing a technique, maybe after the roll, go ask a coach or ask a senior training partner. Say, hey, is this a technique that's pretty solid, or is there something better I should be doing from this position? Because the goal is you're flowing effortlessly, even against resisting opponents. And there you have it, 5 tips to become a dominant white belt. So by the time you've been training 6 months to a year in competition, if you're training smart, regularly, every day, referencing your list of what you should be working on, taking control of your own training, as well as doing whatever you're working on in class as well, then you're going to be wrecking all the other white belts in competition who maybe are just, going through class and rolling and not having a particular plan in mind of what to work and how they should be training. So, good training, good luck in your endeavors.